Thank you very much. Welcome. Today we are diving into being a disciple of Christ. And this is a very interesting topic. Last week we were dealing with the prayer, and we saw how prayer was dynamic. So today we'll dive into this, and as a youth, you really want to know how to follow Jesus, or how to be a disciple of Christ. If you're out there and you're listening to us again, we are happy to welcome you on this telecast. May God bless you as you join us, and it will be short, so we will not really keep you. And so we are picking this one from the book of Romans, and the book of Romans is actually written by Paul. Paul wrote this book of Romans so he wrote to the Romans in the year 57 AD, and he did this when he was in Corinth. Corinth was a hotbed of sexual immorality, and as Paul writes this, you can notice in his writing that he is touching on those issues of dealing with sin, and therefore, as he writes to the Romans. And during that time, the emperor of Rome was Emperor Nero, and he had just been in power for about 3 years, as Paul writes this to the Romans. Now you realize that the chapter 1 to chapter 11 of Romans, Paul is talking about the doctrine, and chapter 12 to chapter 16, Paul is talking about living out the doctrine. Now this is where I pick up this message of today, being a disciple of Christ. And therefore being a disciple of Christ is actually to know how to follow Jesus, to know how to follow Christ. So picking it up from the book of Romans, of course, the verses that we'll dwell on we'll be dwelling on Romans chapter 12 from verse 1 moving onwards up to, actually this proceeds up to the chapter 16, but we will just do like 2 verses only, and then you'll begin to understand. So in Romans chapter from chapter 1 to chapter 11, as I said, Paul brings up this doctrine, and the doctrine here is the righteousness of Christ, the righteousness of God as revealed by Christ to his people. So the doctrine here is like a plumb line. It is like a standard. It is like something that you need to align with. So this is the doctrine, okay? So when we talk about doctrine, it's one thing to understand a standard, and it's another thing to apply or to begin behaving like that standard. So those are 2 things that are different altogether. So to understand a standard is one thing, and then to play out the standard or to practice the standard is totally another thing. And so from Romans chapter 12, that is when now Paul talks about living out the standard. And if I can be able to read here, it says, I beseech you, Paul says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable worship. The topic is being a disciple of Christ. Now listen, friends, as a youth, you can't follow Jesus unless you have understood the doctrine. Unless you have understood the standard, it is difficult to follow him. It's difficult to be a disciple of Christ until you understand the standard, until you understand the doctrine. Until you understand it, it's difficult to follow Christ. And in this, let me just bring 3 things that are very crucial and important for each one of us, so that you can be on the right footing to follow Christ. And I'll give you an example, or yes. So 3 things. 1, if you want to follow Jesus, first of all, you have to make 3 commitments. One of the commitments is the commitment of the intellect. Number 2 is the commitment of the emotions. And then number 3 is the commitment of the will. So you cannot be able to do just one of those commitments and say, okay, I can follow Christ. It's difficult. And it begins with the commitment of the intellect. So the commitment of the intellect has to do with your cognitive understanding, has to do with what the reasoning part of you, so that you can be able to say yes to what you understand. So you can't get saved, you can't even follow Christ until you have known how to articulate these 3 commitments. So you need to understand. And when you understand, you say, okay, fine. Oh, okay, now I understand. So the next thing, I feel like emotions. It's the commitment of the emotions. So I feel like saying yes, I have a feeling. So this is now the emotion. So you commit your emotions, you throw your emotions in. And then number 3 is the commitment of the will. Now you can bring in your will, and you can say, I surrender. This Jesus, I surrender. And I give you an analogy of a marriage. In a marriage, you can't get into a marriage unless you have made the 3 commitments. It's exactly the same how you deal with Jesus. If you don't do this, you can't follow Jesus. So in marriage, you can't sustain a marriage and keep it if you don't make 3 commitments. 1 is that you understand. This person tells you, I would like to marry you. And you understand. And you listen to him, listen to her. And then after you have listened, you have reasoned, then you say, okay, I think I understand. Now I think I understand. Okay? All right? Then, so if you understand, then you begin feeling like getting into that marriage. So the feelings come. Okay? Now when those feelings come, it's normal because it's the commitment of the emotions. So you commit yourself emotionally into that marriage. And then the last one is the commitment of the will, where you say, even if it should die, so let it be, but I am serious enough to marry you. So kill me if you so wish. in that marriage. So those 3 commitments are very, very important. That's why when we commit our will to Jesus, we are saying, Jesus, we don't have another. It's you that I have, and I have decided I am following you. So kill me if you so wish, but I am here. I'm not going away. Those 3 commitments are very, very important. When we talk about being a disciple of Christ, that's exactly, friends, what we mean. Jesus. We can't follow him if we don't commit ourselves this way. Now remember, Paul is talking about the doctrine in chapter 1 to chapter 11. And this doctrine is the righteousness of Christ, the righteousness of God as revealed through Christ to us. And this doctrine here is a standard. We need to understand it. And as I told you, you need to understand the standard, and then from there, then you can be able to apply this standard. And so Paul here is calling on us to do exactly this. Friends, let me tell you something. Why should we follow Jesus? Sometimes we ask ourselves these questions. Why should we follow him? And I'll tell you. Jesus is everything. Christ makes you be aware of things. Christ makes you be sensitive over things. Christ makes you understand quickly. He gives you the intelligence. He gives you to be aware of your environment. He gives you to be ahead of things. He gives you to understand, to know, and to have knowledge, and just to be able to be aware of what is happening in your world today, and be able to make decisions based on knowledge, not hearsay. So I don't know, but how I pray that you understand this, because I lack words to explain to you how important to follow Christ or to be a disciple of Christ. I lack the words of telling you this. It's a mystery, and how I hope that he helps you to understand again. If he doesn't help us to understand, we cannot understand. So, and that's why Paul is saying here, it talks about this doctrine, this standard, talks about this righteousness of God revealed through Christ, and from chapter 12 moving forward, he wants us to live that standard, and he shows us on how to live that standard, and the manner in which he shows us is from verse 1 of chapter 12, and he begins to say, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God. Paul says these words, and I see like tears lingering in his eyes as he says this. I beseech you, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Why does he talk about the body? As Paul was writing this, and as I told you, from a hotbed of sexual immorality in Corinth, he had seen it all. He had known that people can fall, people can go astray, and he knew that they were not following Christ. They knew the standard, but they are not applying it. Okay, in a nutshell, as we close this telecast, let me say this. You cannot follow Christ until you understand this standard properly. And it's important that you know that if you made a commitment of your intellect, you must follow it with the commitment of your emotions, and you must follow it with the commitment of your will. Throw yourself in there in totality. It's easy to know who will fall back and who will continue. It's very easy to know who will backslide and who will not. And this, it's you yourself that you can know this. It's you. So, did you commit yourself? Did you make the 3 commitments? If you did it, then just adjust yourself and help yourself and make the commitment. Because this is what makes people run away from Christianity, because they feel we don't want to relinquish everything. We have to be controlling something. No. If you're controlling something, then Jesus is not your master. If he's your master, he's the one in control. And that's how simple you can know. A marriage that only culminates into a commitment of the intellect, and you forget about the emotions, then you are in the marriage and your emotions are not there. That marriage doesn't work because the emotions are not there. Or you are there, you understand? The emotions are there, but you didn't throw in the will. So your will is elsewhere. It's not there in that marriage. So it doesn't work. It will break. We need to follow Christ. It's as simple as that. Thank you very much. I hope you have understood this, and God bless you. So until next week, we'll be there again to bring another episode of this.